Peas on Moss is brought to you by Kimberly Schaub, a culinary scientist turned business developer. Over the past 4 years, the audience has downloaded episodes over 40,000 times, and we have 1,500 impressions across the website and a host of social media platforms. Will you consider contributing to the show to help keep it on air? Donations through Patreon help to offset the cost of web hosting, editing, and producing the various Peas on Moss offerings, from podcast episodes to videos, and every little bit helps, from corporate advertisement to sponsored content and private contributions. Reach out to me on peasonmoss.com for details. Hey Peas on Moss listeners, welcome to a Quick Bite episode. I'm your host, Kimberly Schaub, a research chef now in business development. This week's guest is Ainsley Moir, and if you've paid attention to food founders and startup businesses, I bet you've seen Ms. Moir's work. Ainsley is the founder of the Healthy Food and Beverage Group, an organization dedicated to helping emerging packaged food and beverage brands get onto more shelves and into more homes. She works directly with food founders to help them build their businesses and brand side of their company so that they can connect with more retail buyers and shoppers. She marries her experience building Fortune 500 brands and running her own food company to share with food founders how to build a packaged food brand strategically without needing to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars. In our Quick Bite, Ainsley talks about the food founder patterns that she has observed in running her consultancy and food business incubator, and she also shares insights about the reality of founding a food business. Spoiler, it's not for everybody. Enjoy this Quick Bite.
So my name is Ainsley Moir, and I run the Healthy Food and Beverage Group, and also the host of the Food Founders podcast and the founder of the FAB community. So FAB standing for Food and Beverage, and we have the FAB Brand Accelerator and the FAB Growth Academy, two different ways to help people grow their businesses.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so are there any patterns that you've noticed among the food founders? You know, you mentioned that the founders usually really have a great handle on their products. They're great cooks or chefs or bakers, or they've found a food solution to a health-related problem. What are some of the kind of top-level patterns that you've noticed among the founders? Perhaps a founder is listening to this, is going to download your podcast and reach out to you, and is also wondering what those patterns are that indicate a need to them.
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the pieces that I see often in the food industry is because food founders are so great in the kitchen, they tend to spend sometimes too much time in there because it's what they know and it's comfortable, and not enough time necessarily on figuring out the business piece of it. I would say, versus having 12 different SKUs, focusing on 3 top performers and figure out how to master those, get traction with those, and then start expanding your line. But this is a challenge that I see so many food founders struggle with because they love their caregivers or nurturers. They know that food is nurturing. And so they want to nurture with this delicious flavor, this delicious benefit that they have. And I say, pause, let's focus on the business side, and then we can go back to playing in the kitchen. But that is definitely a trend that I see with a lot of different food founders. Another big piece that I see is not connecting in enough with the consumers. So one of the things from chatting with the food founders on the Food Founders podcast was the brands that are, I would say, further along that journey in terms of their quote unquote success. They have been remarkable at staying so connected in with their consumer and not being married to any one thing about their brand. They are saying, they recognize, I have this product, but it's for the people. It is for this audience that I am trying to serve. So the ones that are so curious and listening to their consumers, and if their consumers are constantly saying, oh, I wish you had this flavor. And they're like, great. Maybe we bring in this flavor and take out that flavor. Or if they're constantly, I wish this came in a different format, or, oh, this packaging doesn't make sense to me. Um, really being nimble in that is a really, really big key to success in the food industry. And if you are a small food founder, you have that luxury. If you are a large food company, it's a lot more difficult to do that for sure. I'm going to say almost near impossible because I know how much work. I know that we're, in large companies, we're developing brands and businesses. Sometimes I've worked on companies that we're building our innovation pipeline for 3 years out. So that's a lot more difficult. But if you're a small food founder, be so nimble, like order small runs of labels, order small runs of packaging up front so that you can adapt to what the market needs. Yeah, I think that's a really, really big key to success that I've seen the food founders that are, let's say, winning in their industries or on a really great growth trajectory. That's what they've done. They've been so close to their customer, so curious to them, and pivoting to delivering them what they need versus what, as a founder, they think people need. I say, like, listen to what people are telling you. If they're saying, oh my gosh, I need this in a multi-pack, give the people what they want.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because I guess the application or the use of the product that the founder might have in mind could be a little bit different once the consumer picks it up and she starts to think, oh, I could use this here, or I'd like to bring it with me more easily. I always have to put it into a container, but if these were single serve, to your point, I could just throw it in my bag and go. And that gives the product a chance to be more incorporated into the user's life, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, just like you're creating it for them, right? So just stay really, really focused in on them.
What are some of the barriers to entry as far as getting into retail these days? I'm thinking, we're sitting in the middle of a pandemic, and there has been a very strong shift into direct to consumer sales. So, do you think the barriers to entry to getting into a grocery retail setting have changed because of that?
I think that it's definitely changing. I think that barriers to entry, like, let's say, general speaking, and then we'll come into the pandemic during this time. But generally speaking, you know, you have to understand that there's different planogram windows, that there are different constraints happening. You have to go in with a story that's going to make them want to put you on shelf. And depending on where you are, you have to pay for that shelf placement as well. So that's something that I think a lot of food founders aren't necessarily sure of. I mean, I think focusing on that story and the need for your product and the demand for it versus what your product tastes like is a mistake I see a lot of people make. Like, the taste comes at the end of the presentation almost. Like, get them buying in on the need for this category growing and your product solving the need and fitting into that growth. I don't think that has changed at all. But what we are seeing is that buyers are finally starting to kind of open up and start talking with brands again, which is great. Um, but the retail industry is shifting in a sense that there's different allocations now being put in store because we're seeing kind of a few different trends happening. We are seeing in some places there's a larger health trend going on. So if you have claims that can speak to that, you got to, really tout them really loud to connect with that buyer. In other areas, we are actually seeing that more familiar brands are doing really well right now. So if you have a brand new product, I would say that you need to talk about the occasion that is familiar with people. Or, let's say I'm going to think cereal, for instance. It's a very familiar category where it's a ritual that people do in the morning, especially when we're young. People do that as their children growing up. You might have a brand new innovative cereal, during this time, I would go in and pitch it in the sense of this is an eating occasion that there is this comfort in, and this is why you need to carry us. And then obviously go into, what is unique and different to you. But we're seeing this trend of familiarity. And I think that just comes from, the human psychology of there's so much change right now. There's so much unknown going on right now that we are seeing consumer behavior shift to, I just want something familiar. And also, I want things that are going to be good for my body and good for, the health of my family. So retailers are starting to open up and have these conversations now. They are relying a lot more on things like Range Me. They are relying a lot more, pretty much everyone is just doing digital meetings right now. So, I think that those conversations are still happening, and a lot of them are trying to figure out e-commerce a lot right now as well. So if you have e-commerce sales and you can have that conversation with retailers to say, hey, we know how to do this online, and we can, make sure that we're doing the same thing with your store. That's a conversation that they're happy to hear as well, because it's a new territory for a lot of them that aren't maybe fully set up on it, or they just weren't fully believing that that was the future of shopping, which I think we're seeing it is certainly going to be a significant part of shopping moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It's been very interesting to see this flood of activity for online shopping. Certainly, the markets that are already online, like Thrive Market, have obviously done quite well. And retailers who had started dabbling with different ways of delivering product to consumers, whether that's, kind of we'll shop for you and you can come by and pick it up. You never even have to come into the store models, or again, kind of delivery models. Those have all really changed in the last few years, but especially in the last, 125 days.
Yeah.
For your founders who were in the middle of the Fab Growth Academy and they were in the courses, did you see this kind of freeze or deer in the headlights effect where, because of the uncertainty going on globally, was there a tendency to want to drop out and just freeze in place? Or how did you talk your founders through that?
Yeah, I think that it really had founders dig deep and say, like, what am I really doing with this? So I think some people froze. I think most of the world froze for a little bit. Then what I've actually seen is just this tenacity to be like, I have to figure this out. Like, I even saw when the pandemic hit, a lot more people signed up for the academy because they were like, I need to figure this out. I've been going at this alone for however long, and I'm committed to my business and I want to figure it out. I need help. This is where I'm going to go. So it was great to see so many people raise their hands and say, I need to figure this out. I want to figure this out. This is great. I think people froze for a little bit, but then they were just pushing through. They just pushed through in terms of trying to make this work. There's for sure pivots going on. People starting, but never had real e-commerce sites before. We're now working with them to get their websites fully up and e-commerce enabled. People who, didn't really do much on Amazon are now really focusing on doing more of that. But really in the food industry, it's kind of been kind of twofold. Like, businesses have either completely slowed down, and I would say those businesses are maybe didn't have a lot of those pieces figured out up front. I've seen a lot of other businesses, especially ones that I work with, that have had some of their best months ever since all of this has happened. And that is because they had some of those foundational pieces in place and they were just committed to figuring it out. And a lot of that did come from e-commerce sales, but a lot of that also came from, retail stores and just making sure that we have a product that fits the needs of what people need right now.
That's it for this week's Peas on Moss Quick Bite. Thank you, Ainsley Moir, for your time and insights. If you are a food founder, consider Ainsley's Food Brands That Sell Business Incubator course and learn strategies, gain connections, and start thriving in your business. Gratitude goes to the Patreon sponsors who are helping me offset the costs of podcasting this year, as I don't have any official sponsors. If your company is interested in sponsoring the podcast, please reach out to me on peasonmoss.com. With over 40,000 downloads and perennial content, we're here to serve the industry and bring you stories about the people behind the brands.